Greetings. Thank you for joining me for A Sacred Life, a new series of uplifting, empowering, and certainly well-timed classes that are presented to those of you who are truly interested, feel within your own heart, have a passion for wanting to take ownership of who you also are, this souled nature, this eternal self. I, Robert, have been serving the teachings of Michael for over 20 years, and it's my honor to be of service to each of you so that you may experience something that I've also allowed in my own life. Instead of having just this human experience that feels disconnected, separated from both the body, our own feelings, our own senses, our own passion for life, and of course our own soul nature, each of you have chosen to do something radically different. Instead of following perhaps some of the, teachings that have been put in front of humanity in a variety of institutions and a variety of organized religions, you decided to explore this relationship as an independent, sovereign human being. And for that, I applaud you. It's a choice that I too made, and like you, I was honored to receive so much support and guidance from a variety of other people in my life. And so again, it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of this human soul relationship to offer you something that is tangible, that is practical, and that becomes very real. Let's take a deep breath here together. In part one of today's class, it's really our service to you to help you to create a safe space within yourself so that you can rely on you, not just the human, but rely on you to have a conscious relationship with this eternal self, to live your life consciously, to make clear, deliberate choices that serve how you want to experience life. A radical shift. It seems so simple to have such a relationship. In fact, when you hear our words talk about it, well, why not? Why is that such a problem? To just be able to have an experience of life, a life experience that enables you to experience a new type of freedom. A freedom that doesn't rely on external elements, external sources to provide for you direction, guidance, support, a truth. In this new teaching, called new because it's new to the human experience that has gone and is almost completely mental at this point in time. New in that it allows you to experience the joy, the wonder, the exhilaration, and the passion of feeling fulfilled. That doesn't mean from your human experience that you're not challenged. You are, and you will continue to be. It doesn't mean from your human experience that you've obtained some kind of perfected state of consciousness and you're labeling that enlightenment. From our teachings, and in my service to the teachings of Michael, we call that a lie. For there is truly no state of perfection within all of creation. It is but an experience that continues in that experience to expand beyond what it was just a moment ago. If you want to label that perfection, the allowance of the expansion and change of life itself to continue to grow beyond whatever comfort zone each souled being has created for themselves, then so be it. We prefer to move out of that terminology, that kind of restriction. This class is all about helping you to become aware that you are very much involved with consciously creating your own experience as a master. But of course, it would be of service to you if you also were aware of how you're creating that life experience unconsciously. So, let's take another deep breath. And thank you, Robert. As I, Michael, allow myself to be here, as Robert allows me to be here in such a way that makes this quite real and quite tangible for each of you. We don't present ourselves as a channeled message. We present ourselves as a living experience, as an example of what it means to live a sacred life. Not a perfect life, but a sacred life. Sacredness meaning that you honor the presence of Spirit. You honor the rights of Spirit to be present in your life. That's been something that humanity has been avoiding or distracted by for a long time. There is but a few who have left this planet who call themselves ascended masters that obtained this kind of freedom, a freedom that allows them to experience consciousness in motion through their own creations, through their own creativity, through their own joy and passion for living life. That is the birthright of every human being. It is the gift that was handed down to every being when you left home, the kingdom. And as a gift, it enables you to be able to experience life as being sacred. As you learn to allow the presence of Spirit in the form of your eternal self to also look through your eyes, to also, by looking through your eyes, to see the world that is right in front of you as a human being from a very different perspective, in such a way that you then see the beauty of life unfolding. Not because on this earth it continues to become more and more beautiful. It's quite the opposite, is it not? For much is changing on this planet that from the outside in looks like the beauty is becoming diminished. And in some ways it is. From the outside in, it appears that the beauty and the integrity of life isn't being honored. From the outside in, it appears that humanity as a family has turned their back on the sacredness of life and have replaced it with toys, have replaced it with a daily and ongoing addiction to mentally masturbating to life and being fulfilled by a substitute for a true orgasmic relationship with all of life. The sacredness of life is the ultimate orgasm that humanity has denied themselves. You, dear ones, have chosen something radically different. You've chosen to work with this energy in a way that is empowering and freeing. So, in our teachings, we certainly honor the individuated aspect of who you are as a creator. For that is your birthright, to be the individuated fragment of Spirit, of the source of life. As we've been introducing you to the eternal self, there is also the eternal one, whose consciousness, whose presence resides within every eternal self that allows that presence to be present. And one of the things that has been misunderstood from the human perspective, is the very character of the Eternal One. And so let's briefly introduce such a consciousness that has no agenda, that set itself free without any conditions connected to it. It's quite different from the outside in how you've been introduced to the source of life. This father figure that has an agenda that you then need to prove that you deserve this father figure's appreciation, love, affection. In our teaching, we introduce how the mind, in its relationship to feeling separate from that Eternal One, represented individually to each of you as that eternal self, has been distorted and has been adapted as being the characteristic of whom many pray to, chant to, and bow before, hoping for a blessing. As this presence was allowed into the embodied state of every eternal self, the radiance of its unconditional acceptance for all of life is profound. What you have discovered as a human being, that it is so profound when you allow this presence to be a part of your day-to-day reality, that it literally removes you from the consciousness that is the consciousness representing the family of humanity. And that's a little uncomfortable. That leaves you feeling at times a little uneasy, a little lonely. So let's take a breath there. A Sacred Life, Part 1, is all about creating a sacred foundation so that you're not needing humanity or any other being's approval for you to feel complete within yourself. You don't need anybody else's acceptance. You don't need anybody else's love for you to feel love, for you to feel accepted, for you to understand how deep trust goes when you do trust yourself. And so what we are going to begin today in this course is by helping you to understand what it means to create a new support base that doesn't rely on what others expect you to become, but relies on the presence of consciousness that freely shares itself with each of you, without any agenda and without any conditions. What this does in turn, as you allow more and more of that consciousness to be present, is it stirs up within you all that doesn't relate to or resonate with such a freedom. Indeed. Creating a safe space within yourself. In the past, almost all of you who are participating in this class have helped to create or initially initiated the creation of a variety of spiritual institutions, temples, churches, monasteries. In the past, you felt in your heart that it required of you to be in an external environment that allowed you to go so deep within yourself that literally removed yourself from the collective consciousness of humanity, and to feel safe to explore such a natural state of consciousness as the consciousness of your own eternal self, you created these external institutions. It was a beautiful creation. It was gifted initially with some very pure and authentic feelings inside of you. They, of course, became something else, and your relationship to these external safe spaces also changed. You began to find that even though they provided a comfort zone for all of you, they were limited and they became boring. Because what you discovered in these places when you allowed yourself to feel the presence of consciousness is the consciousness in and of itself would not settle for being contained or confined by the very institutions, temples, and monasteries that you helped to create. Many of you today have, in a way, a yearning to return to such a place as you're surrounded by a planet and a human family that is really struggling with life, doing battle with their own demons and projecting those battles outside of themselves and perpetuating a polarized, dualistic system of reality and calling that real, calling that the only real reality. So be it. And so what is the solution then? If you had these external structures and other people to provide a kind of safety, a kind of support, the solution today is viewing and embracing this physical body as a sacred temple, as your new mobile temple, monastery, or church. The beauty of the body itself is it can be in a sovereign relationship with the sacredness of what you choose to call real, of what you choose to term to be sacred. Certainly, we'll introduce through this entire course a variety of ways that the sacredness of life applies to your life. But the beauty of this gift that was handed down to all of creation is it allows you, through your own diversity, to define and to experience life in any way you choose. In this way, the Eternal One, looking through, if you allow it, your eyes as an individuated self, is blessed by you. And in return, you feel blessed by that presence, observing the choices that you've made and participating in the experiences that you choose to have, if you allow it, without interfering, without giving you any kind of advice or support in the way that you're used to it, just offering its presence. For that support and guidance to become more personal, that's where you connect with that eternal self. I, Michael, am a sovereign creator who chooses to honor the sacredness of all of life and serves the sacredness of life in all the ways that I choose to love life. Like every other eternal self, I set free in the same way that the Eternal One set me free. I set numerous parts of myself free, countless parts of myself free, giving each part, each counterpart, each fragment, each aspect the same respect that was given to me by the Eternal One. Non-interference. Unless, of course, you allow it. Robert has chosen to allow me to also be in his life and to maintain as a soul his own sovereign identity. My presence then blends and merges with his, and we have a type of communion, a type of spiritual reunion happening here in this human experience. For this sacred space, then, to feel safe within the physical body, something has to happen on the human's part and on the soul's part, the soul being that part that every eternal self set free. You have to have a passion for living as a human being. For a sacred space to actually feel safe inside a physical body, inside this physical temple, you have to want to be here. Otherwise, the body isn't able to really work with the energies that provide the type of radiance that allow you to feel safe. If you're entertaining the sacredness of life with 1 foot in the body and 1 foot in the etheric realms, the non-physical realms, you're going to find it very, very difficult to actually integrate that experience into this physical experience. In fact, we'll say right now you'll find it impossible to have an integrated human-soul relationship. Now, there's valid reasons why you hesitate to make yourself available to these energies, and we understand that. It hasn't been through all the countless lifetimes that you've been here on this planet, it hasn't been a safe space to be. And even though you have in your own variety of unique ways allowed the presence of consciousness to come into your life, in another lifetime you have tasted that very presence, your relationship as a human being with the rest of humanity never allowed you to really feel safe. And there's a reason for that. For the most part, it has everything to do with curation, developing an addiction to consuming life. Because energy is the most valuable commodity in all of creation. Just as you see that sense of how highly valued energy is within all of creation, in your own world. Consuming life, it's considered normal to the human. It's a natural way of living for the human being. Your economic health and well-being is regulated by your consumer index. And so this whole trust, this whole sense of allowing yourself to be so open, so vulnerable, to develop a safe space within yourself brings up all those other feelings, those unconscious memories, not just here on Earth, but galactic stories begin to become more available to you. You become aware of deep-seated feelings of how energy wasn't allowed, but was obtained. Energy in creation became addicted by creation through the art of consuming, extracting, taking, stealing from forms of life outside of itself. That appetite fueled conflict. It fueled and helped to ignite galactic wars. All this based on the need to obtain energy. And initially, that need was heartfelt, for it was a desire on the individuated soul's part to return home. Life outside of the safe space of home itself, the kingdom, didn't feel safe. And once in that realm of being outside of the kingdom itself, where you never knew conflict, where you never experienced fear, you never experienced doubt, worry, or concern, your support base was provided 24/7. Once outside the kingdom, you are given the freedom to allow yourself to experience the very presence of the consciousness that provided that kind of support base or not. And many chose not because they were influenced by something dark or evil, because they had never experienced being in the void of creation itself, where the opportunity to create anything you wanted as a gift, as the ultimate freedom, resided solely within each and every fragment of the Eternal One. It's a beautiful story, how creation unfolded, and it's also a very sad story of how it became traumatized, how the need to extract and consume energies became the primary appetite for so many beings, countless beings. And so let's address that as it relates to your human experience. Because Earth was created for you to have the opportunity to experience what? To experience all the unfulfilled relationships, to experience the inner conflicts within yourself that became galactic conflicts outside of yourself. Earth was created to slow down the art of creating your own reality so that you could see in slow motion, as painful and as uncomfortable as that has become for almost all of you, that being the nature of this physical reality, to slow it down so that you had the opportunity to become consciously aware of how you're interrelating with life and not allowing the sacredness of life, consciousness itself, to coexist within you. One of the tools that you used lifetime after lifetime and continue to use today is the art of breathing. For you're very aware, and even your mind is on board with it's necessary for you to breathe in order to keep the physical body alive. But the art of breathing, conscious breathing, isn't just relegated to oxygen. When you leave this planet, as a soul, as a non-physical, eternal being, you no longer need or rely on or depend upon oxygen for your life support system, but you're still breathing. What do you breathe when it's not oxygen? The presence of life? The presence of life that's in all of life. The presence of life is self-supporting. It is consciousness supporting itself, which is also you. When you move out of the separation of seeing that you are this, a human body in a human form with a mind that only knows what it knows, but once you allow the presence of consciousness to also support you, that ends the whole addiction to looking outside of yourself for affection, looking outside of yourself for appreciation, looking outside of yourself for energy to sustain you, looking outside of yourself to fulfill your own passions. Conscious breathing then changes and shifts how you're interrelating with the physical reality that you experience each day. Let's put that into motion, into action right now. Let's simply be aware of the breath. And slow your life down to this place where all there is happening in your life is the breath. We know in the background is this ongoing activity called your internal dialogue, that mind chatter, and it's okay. We're not going to try to stop that. But we're also going to pay attention to the breath. And notice that when you are paying attention to just breathing, it does something to the biological system called your body. It does something to the body itself. It triggers different chemicals within the body itself that helps you feel more relaxed, less tense. Let's slow it down wherever you are in your life, whatever your circumstances are. Let's be okay with everything you're doing in your life and just be aware of your breath. And acknowledge that with every breath that you take, life, yes, in the form of oxygen, but also in the formless state of consciousness, is supporting you. Slowing your life down. In this moment, just with us, letting yourself feel this moment that we're sharing together with you. As our consciousness, as I, Michael, am sharing the very radiance of my own consciousness with each of you. One breath. One breath. Notice the longer you're just not so easily distracted by goals or activities, what your mind thinks you should be doing. Notice that there is a degree of interference here that's really not allowing you to feel this full-bodied connection with your own consciousness, full-body relationship with living an orgasmic life. Take another deep breath. And see if you can also feel a sincere, heartfelt love for you. Just for you. For having the courage to be on this planet at this time when not many do have that courage. For having the compassion not only for others, but starting with yourself. To not know where life on earth would end up becoming or being or going, and that you're okay with that. You understood before you came here the great and profound challenges that face this planet and the impact on what that would mean for all of creation. You understood that, and yet you step forward. And you're here, still here, as others have left that have walked beside you or next to you, wanting the very same opportunity to have this embodied relationship with your eternal self, who are no longer here. But you are. As you are breathing and slowing your life down, can you also feel a sincere, deep, and heartfelt appreciation for you? Can you also feel a deep, sincere, and heartfelt love for you? For having the courage to share such a love with you? Let's take a deep breath. As you're feeling this, you're noticing that there is something inside of you that could be interfering with such a gift to simply fall in love with you, to feel such a love for you. You notice there's something deep inside of you that doesn't feel like it's complementing what your heart wants more than anything. To have a conscious relationship with this eternal part of who you also are, this eternal self. You've felt it most of your life, in most every lifetime. You felt it before Earth was created. But something there inside of you isn't allowing you to really be so open, to be so vulnerable, that you would allow the most sacred part of who you are also to also be with you. Take a very deep breath there. Oh, your mind perhaps has labeled it as being darker parts of reality or even yourself. Maybe you can entertain the idea that it's different fragments or counterparts of your eternal self, your own soul nature that have had other past lifetimes here as well, and they didn't get it. They didn't free themselves. They're a little resentful, perhaps jealous that you're this close to your own freedom. Perhaps you feel their presence, their energy in your body. Perhaps you hear the thoughts in your own mind. But let's kind of let that all that's happening from a more galactic stance, let that be what it is. Let's keep this really, really simple and identify the energies here that are not allowing life to be present in a way that certainly would set you free. Let's make it more about your human experience. To keep it simple, so the mind doesn't get caught up in all these theories or actual realities of things going on galactically. Let's just keep it really simple. Let's take a deep breath. As a human being, what are the most predominant human emotions that you feel throughout your day that interfere with you being able to have a conscious relationship with your eternal self, that are also connected to looking outside of yourself for safety, that are also connected to looking outside of yourself for your freedom, that are also connected to playing the victim. You might say to us, well, at the forefront, Michael, I would say anger, jealousy, resentment. But we would say those emotions are but a byproduct of a primary emotion. And we are bringing these emotions up at this time in this class so that you can distinguish the difference between what you're feeling as a human being emotionally and what you're feeling as a soul, as consciousness. What human emotion has tried to convince you that it represents love? By loving others first, by sacrificing yourself, by compromising yourself. Yes, sympathy. Sympathy is the human emotion that perpetuates the need to consume energy. By getting energies to come back to you in the form of pity, this emotion can literally sabotage your creations. It can sabotage your abundance. It can undermine your intimate relationships, and it can degrade your health and well-being. So how do you know when this emotion is at the forefront of your life? The primary red flag that comes up for you that can tell you immediately that sympathy is now in charge of how you are either consciously or unconsciously participating in your life is when you're trying to make others feel responsible for how you're feeling. You then become actively involved in trying to help others resolve their issues because you're responding to other people's plight not from a place that is clean in terms of support, but from a sympathetic response to what's going on. And you respond to other people who are having a difficult time in their life sympathetically with the hope that they in turn will feel sympathetic about your life. This describes a type of exchange of energies that are not self-supporting. It's relying on others' feelings about you, and you in turn relying on how they respond to you. We have been teaching over the last 20 years how to cut energy cords that extend between the 7 chakras from your physical body as they are then plugging into other people's bodies as a way to primarily unconsciously extract energies. Now, it sounds like some kind of vampire movie, and in a way it kind of is when you're not conscious that sympathy relies on the extraction of energy from other people by getting other people to feel sympathetic about you, which is the cornerstone or the foundation of a victimized life. One moment. Sympathy, for the most part, is an unconscious relationship to life, but as you have awakened, and it is required that you be and have gone through the awakening process to even be here, participating in this class, you're now aware of what is going on inside of you. You've chosen to become that aware of what's going on inside of you. Your awakening process has brought these human emotions to the forefront of your life, which for a lot of you sidetracked you. For some of you, it sidetracked you to the degree that you wanted nothing more to do with this whole embodied enlightenment relationship, because it was very painful to become conscious that you were unconsciously involved using sympathy in extracting energies. This emotion does not honor a sovereign creator. And again, it uses pity as a tool to comfort others, which each of you have discovered that isn't enough. It doesn't provide the quality of comfort that you are seeking, that you want to experience. Now, we want you to be aware here. We are not saying that this human emotion is you. We are saying that these human emotions are a part of you. These human emotions are connected very much to your life. You have a relationship with them, either as an unconscious human being or as one who is already awakened, now as a master. Now as a master. Sympathy, then, relies on plugging in energetically to other people to get in return a sympathetic response. It's a human emotion that you've inherited that is not you. It has been created by your own mind as a way to support itself. But what you've noticed, and what all of humanity has noticed, is that these, and primarily this human emotion, also degrades the health and well-being of this body, that it has greatly diminished the longevity of the physical body. What if we were to say to you that the original design of this physical body was designed for it to last 1,000 years? But connected to these human emotions that degrade that experience, who would want to be here for that long? And so when you literally cut the cords with other people that you have a sympathetic relationship with, and primarily that begins with your parents. And that's some of the most difficult choices to make, is to disconnect from your parents, because from your human perspective, that has been and was, as a child, your primary support base. Where it became awkward for you is when you refused, or at least attempted to refuse, to live up to their expectations, to become what they had become, conditioned, programmed, to live the life that mass consciousness expects of every human being, to participate in energy extracting. And energy extraction requires that there be one who is taking and one who feels it's taken from them, the oppressor and the victim. Duality at work. There's other forms of duality that don't rely on that kind of extraction, but a polarized dualistic system has beings, life, feeding on one another, eventually doing battle with one another so as to obtain more energy. And from that place, to obtain a sense of dominion over life, so that life that then serves them becomes their support base. Energetically, Earth is not free. If the mind is dictating for humanity what is real and what is not real. You are here to experience something radically different. And by creating a sacred foundation that sets the sympathetic relationships you have with other people free, that opens up some energies in your body and allows more energies to come into your body that are based in consciousness. that are self-supporting, that don't need anything outside of you to support itself. And so this whole degree of disconnecting or cutting these cords primarily is a practice that needs to happen sometimes on an hourly, if not daily basis. In our experience in working with others, it is a practice that can take a few years before one consciously feels a tangible experience of having freed themselves, of having so many other energies outside of them interfering with their clarity. It's a difficult thing to do, to let go of family. When you love family, when you're not blaming them, you're not saying to them by cutting these energetic cords that are based in sympathy, you're not saying to them that I don't love you. You're inviting them to set you free. And if they aren't free themselves, they don't know how to do that. And so you end up becoming a teacher for family members, mom and dad, siblings. You end up becoming a teacher for your neighbors, your friends, your co-workers, for humanity in general, and for all of creation. For what it looks like to take the gift of creation that was handed down to all of creation and to take ownership of the sacredness of life, the sacredness being consciousness, which provides a self-supported system. What happens to most human beings that become consciously involved with disconnecting these horizontal cords that are violating the sacredness of the sovereignty of life? They try to make feeding on each other a little less unappetizing. And they do that by becoming involved in an energy called empathy. Now, this can sound pretty cold-hearted because there's a lot of people who feel that they are being of service to others as healers by embodying an empathetic response to life. Empathy is one of the primary human emotions that gets activated when someone becomes more conscious of choosing to love themselves. And it's one step towards a human being's sovereignty. Those who work with empathy rely on their intuitive abilities to feel into the energy of people around them. And in service from a misplaced sense of love, they rely on empathy by compromising and sacrificing their sovereignty and the health and well-being of their own physical body by processing the unresolved feelings or emotions in another human being for them. When someone comes to a healer who is working with their personal relationships with another human being, they can take on the energies of conflict between that person and the other person, which temporarily creates a sense of relief for the person that is seeing them and for the other person who is also engaged in that personal relationship, an intimate relationship. But then it fades. It's a temporary fix. It's a temporary band-aid. A person who is experiencing a physical diseasement can temporarily be healed because that healer takes on for them or removes for them from an empathetic place what is creating the diseasement in their own physical body. But of course, they can't take away from that person their ability to create whatever they want. They aren't actually teaching them how to be a conscious creator of their own experience. So as an example, you can be in a room with a group of people if you're an empathetic person and literally feel the energy of the room all around you. And if you're working with these energies from an empathetic place, then you are allowing the energies of that room to come into your body. You process for that room all the imbalances, which gives the room a sense of relief, but it is temporary. For they just go back to creating exactly what created the diseasement to begin with, whether it be physical or emotional. Empathy, then, is certainly a more enlightened state in relationship to sympathy, but it's still not truly loving you. It's not honoring the love that must be given to you first. It's asking people to recognize that you have compromised and sacrificed yourself for their well-being, which is still extracting energies, which is still perpetuating this need to support yourself based on the response that life has to you, whether that life is the form of a human being or not. Empathy, then, still does not honor your sovereignty. And so with these human emotions, and these are but two, but we want to keep this really simple. And so we're going to stay with just those two. These human emotions are fueled by the human's wants and desires, which were created by your conditioned mind. These human wants and desires are primary responses that are often extremely unfulfilling. And one of the most powerful ways for a human being to feel a sense of fulfillment, to feel loved back, is to use a substitute for passion that you call sexuality. You, a lot of you, use your sexual needs and desires from a human perspective to feel fulfilled. You are using sexual energies as they are deeply tied into these human wants and desires to extract energy from someone else to give you the feeling of feeling fulfilled. Temporarily, it works. Temporarily, a good orgasm brings about a sense of fulfillment. But of course, there's also an element of addiction to these sexual energies becoming a substitute for the soul's passion. These sexual energies do not initiate the creative juices within you. They are relegated to creating a sense of fulfillment based almost solely on the human's wants and desires. Then what is the primary interference between an intimate relationship between two people? And primarily that is based on, if you're not giving to the partner you're living with what they need from you, there's going to be problems. If you're not able to sexually fulfill yourself, then how in the world are you going to be able to fulfill your partner? And if they don't feel that fulfillment coming from you because they're not doing that for themselves as well, they're going to look elsewhere. The feeding continues. The need to consume energies continues. One of the most potent and painful and disrespectful ways of extracting energies is when you use your sexual needs and desires and take from another who is so open, so vulnerable, to allowing you to not only physically blend and merge with them, but to literally extract energies from them to obtain an energy release, what you call orgasm. There, of course, is an orgasmic state and a physical orgasm that's not connected to extracting energies. It's not connecting to feeding. That has nothing to do with consuming. And so it is vital, as we create this sacred foundation, that you become consciously aware and become responsible for what these human emotions are feeding on. Take a breath there. What then is the primary emotion that interferes with your clarity? Because each of you can feel these wants and desires come up every single day, and you feel them coming up throughout your entire day. They need to be fed. What interferes with your clarity to be able to become the observer rather than the participant? Doubt. Doubt keeps you feeling really small. Doubt keeps you feeling disempowered. Doubt keeps you feeling unawakened. Doubt is the emotion that your mind created to help to maintain control of your perceptions. Now, that's a pretty bold statement for us to make. But is it doing it from a malicious place? No. It's doing it from a perception based on your past and only your past, that this experience here on earth as a human being is not safe. And it will do everything in its power to provide a system of support that allows your human emotions to feel safe. Not consciousness. There's not an issue of safety. If we have consciousness involved, there is an issue of safety. If we're still unconsciously not aware or allowing for these emotions to get triggered, and we end up getting engaged in what the emotions are dictating for us, what the emotions are pulling us into. Worry and concern are servants to doubt. And ultimately, doubt keeps you from allowing. Keeps you from allowing. Where would you find doubt most prominent in your life? What is your favorite doubt, to keep this more light? We would say, for most of humanity, your favorite doubt is the fear of intimacy. The fear of intimacy denies you of having not only an intimate relationship with another human being, or an intimate relationship with how you want to feel, but it definitely cuts off an intimate relationship with your own eternal self, your own soul nature. Intimacy also is connected to being vulnerable. And one of the favorite doubts for most human beings is the fear of being exposed in a world that doubts itself. It doesn't feel safe. How could it feel safe if everyone doubts themselves? And so that puts you in a very awkward relationship with life and with consciousness. Doubt puts you in a place of fearing what you are receiving. How do you trust what you're receiving? You doubt receiving what you don't know ahead of time. The mind, without knowing what consciousness is, has a really hard time allowing you to receive without knowing, without seeing tangible evidence that this consciousness that's spoken about is actually real. So what's the solution to breaking free of extracting energies? What's the solution to the need to consume? What's the solution that allows you to have a sovereign support base that doesn't need anything outside of itself? We move into another feeling that's based in consciousness, that can complement your human emotions. You know it as compassion. In this state, a compassionate relationship with life, you can feel the energy of those all around you, but you recognize it's not your responsibility to get involved, either by reacting to what you're feeling by those around you, or by processing for them what you feel they are stuck within. Compassion allows people the freedom to choose for themselves, even if it's so awkward for you to watch other people continue to hurt themselves. I, Michiel, found it difficult to watch Robert continue to hurt himself, dislike himself, doubt himself. I had to step aside and let him decide whether he was going to take the most ultimate risk and allow me to come in. Even though it was awkward and painful for me to watch how painful it was for him to feel disconnected, disassociated from his support base. True compassion, and the part about compassion that we see makes all of you feel really uncomfortable, is true compassion does appear to be selfish. It appears to people looking at you from the outside in that this isn't some elevated state of consciousness compassion. They see it as they're looking at you so engaged in sympathy and empathy as just an inflated ego. And yet it's further from the truth. It couldn't be further from the truth. It is profound to be here on this planet in a state of compassion, but not to be here in terms of getting sucked into all these internal conflicts that have been externalized, not getting sucked into resolving for these internal conflicts in service to the light. True compassion does look very selfish, but it allows you to do exactly what brings resolution to energies that are stuck. It allows you to be the radiant being that you naturally are, the gift of creation, handed down to every self, every soul. Consciousness does all the work for you in the form of your radiance. It is a sacred relationship, being in a state of consciousness. A sacred relationship that allows you to be who you are and to allow others to be who they are choosing to be. We get it. You look at humanity, you scratch your head and wonder, why would they choose pain? Why would they choose to struggle? Why would they choose to limit their own livelihood? Because they are programmed and become addicted to the programming of those sympathetic and empathetic emotions. Sympathy, for the most part, is an unconscious relationship to life. And no matter how many sounds you make or how loud you want to speak your truth, you cannot awaken those that are fully engaged in a sympathetic relationship. They have to choose, as you chose, to go beyond that, to break themselves free. As a compassionate human being, there's really nothing for you to do but to live your life as one who is in love with them, self. You act more as a witness to life by allowing the presence of your eternal self to look at life through your eyes, by allowing the presence of the Eternal One to observe, to act as a witness. Remember the Eternal One. It's a hands-off approach. You must allow it. It's a hands-off approach. It will not interfere. Even when you allow it, whether it be the Eternal One or your eternal self, it is a hands-off approach. You must allow the relationship, and you control the relationship. As deep as you're willing to allow that relationship to develop is entirely up to you. Non-interference, no control issues, no agenda. Sounds good initially, can be troublesome to your human self who would like your eternal self at points in your life to just take over, take control. You must allow it to be present. And if it's about control, it will withdraw. Just take a deep breath. So as you move out of the dysfunction of relying on sympathy, empathy, and move into compassion, you begin to develop a sovereign relationship, first within yourself, which allows you to have a direct and honest communication between the parts of you that you are not, but you certainly have a relationship with them. The parts of you that you are not, but you are having a relationship with them, is your mind, your body, and your emotions. Consciousness in the form of your eternal self, and as you as a soul that was set free by your eternal self, allows itself, by allowing consciousness to be a part of its life, to have an ongoing, intimate, direct, honest relationship with the parts of you that you are not, but you're willing to have a relationship with them, a sacred relationship with them. This initiates a type of intimacy that you haven't experienced with another human being, but it begins inside. It begins with how you relate to those parts of you that you are not. Now we can expand upon that and include all the different fragments and counterparts and aspects of who you also are. But let's keep it simple. Let's keep it really, really simple, because we find that when we move into these other galactic portions of who you also are, it ends up being like mind candy. And then the mind uses that as a distraction. Indeed, intimacy allows for the merge and blending. Just as you're allowing the merging and blending of your eternal self with your soul, just as your human nature is allowing the blending of your soul and eternal self with itself, that develops a very deep sense of intimacy, which initiates trust. Trust. The knowingness inside of you. The knowingness inside of you that you are consciousness in a variety of forms. And because you are consciousness, you freely share who you are with anything called life, including the parts of your own human experience that have been pretending to represent your consciousness. Your mind, your body, and your emotions. In this new relationship, you learn to accept, no matter your story, no matter your circumstances, you. It is not an intellectual concept acceptance. When you open yourself up because you've stopped extracting energies, you stopped relying on human emotions to define for you your human experience, then you'll really taste what this acceptance really feels like. It's the ultimate self-forgiveness for betraying yourself without judgment, without blame. It is just what it is. Let's take a deep breath there. So we want you to practice the art of being sovereign by becoming more consciously aware of where you are following the human emotions and the patterns of behavior that are addicted to those human emotions. We also want you to practice, if you haven't already, cutting these energetic cords, imagining that between you and any other person that you are aware of just using some scissors and cutting these cords of energy that extend between your chakras and theirs, setting them free and setting yourself free from a place of love, from a place of respecting yourself and them, not relying on anybody else as your support base. In relationship to then these empathetic energies, you practice mirroring back energies initially as a way to catch your breath. You mirror back energies by simply imagining that right in front of you is a full-length mirror. The back of the mirror is facing you, and what is reflecting away from you is all that's being projected into you. All those cords, all that energy that's seeking energy to consume. When you mirror back, you reflect back energies that you are saying, no, I don't allow anything in life to take from me what I haven't freely shared. Once you get a real sense of how that feels to be in a sovereign relationship, then you can put away or put aside the need to cut cords. You can put aside the need to reflect back, because you're in such a deep sense of trust, because you've allowed this compassion to run so deep inside of you that you just allow not only consciousness to be in you, but you also allow all energies just to flow right through you. They're just passing through. When you're in this sense of love for self, this deep felt compassion for you, where you make you the most valuable part of all of life, your life, then all these energies that are projected at you, coming with the intention of wanting to extract or consume or feed upon you, there's nothing to connect to. For consciousness cannot be extracted. Consciousness cannot be consumed. Consciousness cannot be stolen. It can only be allowed. Let's take a deep breath as we end this part of part 1, and we look forward to continuing with these teachings in the next phase of a sacred life. All of our blessings, dear ones.